What if I told you that the absolute best exercise to lower your blood pressure doesn't involve running a single mile,
Yeah, and it doesn't involve lifting a heavy barbell either.
right? It actually doesn't even require you to, like, move your joints at all, which
Yeah.
is wild. So welcome to the deep dive.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to get into this one.
Because today we are looking at this massive, just a mountain of clinical data, and it basically proves that sitting perfectly still against a wall might actually be the most powerful medicine for your cardiovascular system.
It really is.
Yeah.
I mean, you were talking about interventions here that rival actual pharmaceutical drugs just by changing, how you hold tension in your body.
Which is just crazy to think about because, well, if you're the listener right now addressing you directly, you might be one of the nearly half of all adults walking around with elevated blood pressure.
Yeah, the statistics are actually pretty staggering when you look at population health.
And the typical experience at the doctor is just, I don't know, it's incredibly frustrating. You go in, they wrap that cold cuff around your arm, the Velcro rips, the machine beeps, and
And then numbers come back high.
exactly, the numbers are high. And then you get this incredibly generic advice, right? Like, oh, eat a little less salt, maybe try to walk more, reduce your stress.
Right, which, I mean, that's well-intentioned advice, but it completely lacks clinical precision.
Yeah, it's not like fixing a broken bone. Like, if you break your arm, there's an x-ray, there's a jagged line, they point to it, set it, cast it. But with blood pressure, you're just sent home with this vague directive to, like, move more.
Which leaves you feeling entirely unmoored. Move more is a starting point, sure, but it is not a protocol.
So the mission of our deep dive today is to fix that. We've gathered a stack of recent clinical trials, meta-analyses from PubMed, scientific reviews, all to give you a definitive answer.
Exactly. Because the science shows that the specific type of movement you choose triggers vastly different chemical and structural responses inside your arteries.
So, should you be doing cardio or lifting weights or literally just holding perfectly still? You brought a massive study to the table today that I think we should use as our, like, North Star.
Yeah, the Edwards study. It's a 2023 paper published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine.
And it wasn't just a regular study, right? It was a network meta-analysis of 270 randomized trials?
With nearly 16,000 participants in total. It's massive.
Okay, before we get to the wild results of that, what exactly makes a network meta-analysis so special, like compared to just a regular study?
Well, so a standard clinical trial usually just compares two things, right? Say, jogging versus doing nothing.
Yeah.
Or medication A versus medication B.
Right, pretty straightforward.
Yeah. And then a traditional meta-analysis simply lumps a bunch of those similar trials together to get a bigger sample size. But a network meta-analysis is much more complex.
How so?
Imagine a massive tournament bracket for medical treatments. It allows researchers to mathematically compare interventions head-to-head, even if they weren't directly compared in the original trials.
Oh, wow. So you can take data from like a swimming study and data from a completely different weightlifting study.
Exactly.
Mm.
And you use a shared comparator, like a control group, to see which one statistically wins. It is basically the gold standard for ranking medical treatments.
I love that. So we essentially have a giant statistical cage match of every exercise modality known to man to see what actually lowers blood pressure.
That's a great way to put it.
But before we reveal the heavy hitters in that cage match, I think we need to understand the arena itself, the plumbing inside the human body.
Yes, vascular aging. This is so critical to understand.
Because why does blood pressure go up as we age? What is physically happening? Because, I always just thought of it as the heart pumping harder.
Right, people always blame the heart. But the heart pumping harder is really only half the equation, and often it's actually the consequence, not the root cause.
Oh, interesting. So what's the root cause?
To truly understand hypertension, you have to look at the physical architecture of your blood vessels. There's this fantastic 2025 paper in cardiovascular research by Abdelatif and colleagues.
Which we have right here, yeah.
Right, and it details vascular aging. As you age, your arteries undergo this profound structural stiffening. They literally change their physical composition.
And the stiffening, it isn't just one single thing going wrong, right? The sources mention a combination of villains, like calcification, increased wall thickness, and changes to the proteins inside the vessel wall.
Yeah, the proteins are key. To visualize this, picture the wall of your artery, not as just a single sheet, but as a layered tube.
Okay, a layered tube.
And the middle layer, which is called the media, is packed with two primary structural proteins, collagen and elastin.
Okay, and their names kind of tell you exactly what they do, I'm assuming.
Exactly. Elastin is what makes your arteries stretchy, pliable, resilient, and collagen is more like biological scaffolding. It's rigid and tough.
So in a young, healthy artery, you have an abundance of that healthy elastin.
Right. It's highly elastic.
I'm picturing it like a brand new, incredibly stretchy silicone garden hose, you know? When the heart pumps a huge surge of blood, that flexible hose just expands outward to absorb the pressure.
Yes. And then it gently snaps back to its original shape to push the blood along the line. That expansion is vital. It completely buffers the violent force of the heartbeat.
But as we age, we experience what was the term in the paper, elastin fragmentation.
Elastin fragmentation, yes.
Yeah.
Those stretchy fibers literally fray and break down over time.
Oh man, so the stretchy stuff is dying off.
And at the exact same time, the body starts depositing more of that rigid collagen into that middle layer, adding calcification, where actual calcium deposits build up in the tissue.
And suddenly that beautiful stretchy silicone hose turns into old, dry, brittle PVC piping.
That is the exact physics problem. If your heart has to push the exact same volume of fluid through a rigid PVC pipe that physically cannot expand.
The pressure inside that pipe absolutely skyrockets.
Right.
It has nowhere else to go.
Exactly. The entire system is forced to operate under immense mechanical strain. This is why hypertension is so damaging. It's this sheer force tearing at your microvasculature constantly.
And clinically, the sources say doctors measure this rigidity using a metric called pulse wave velocity, or PWV, which popped up in almost all the papers we reviewed.
It did. It's a hugely important metric.
But how did the doctor actually measure the speed of a pulse? Like, how does that work in a clinic?
Well, think about throwing a heavy stone into a perfectly still pond.
Okay.
You watch the ripples move across the surface of the water, right? When your heart beats, it doesn't just push blood. It actually sends a physical pressure waves traveling through the walls of your arteries.
Ah, okay. So it's a physical shock wave.
Exactly. And if the artery is soft, compliant, flexible, like our silicone hose, it absorbs a lot of that energy, and the wave travels relatively slowly down your arm or your leg.
Because that squishy material is dampening the shock wave. That makes total sense.
Precisely. But if the artery is stiff and rigid, like the PVC pipe, the wave has absolutely nothing to absorb it. So it rockets through the vessel much, much faster.
So in a clinic, they just time how fast that wave travels.
Yeah, they place sensors, usually one on the carotid artery in your neck and one on the femoral artery in your leg, and they measure exactly how fast that pressure wave travels between those 2 points.
And that's measured in meters per second, right? So the higher the velocity, the stiffer your arteries are.
Right. A high PWV number is essentially a blaring alarm bell for your cardiovascular future. It is a profound predictor of cardiovascular morbidity.
But the structural stiffening is really only one part of the tragedy here, right? Because the sources also talk about something called endothelial dysfunction.
Yes, the endothelium.
Let's unpack that, because it sounds like it's basically the control center for the whole operation. That's the inner lining of the blood vessels, right? The part that actually touches the flowing blood.
Yeah, it's a single layer of specialized cells lining the entire interior of your vascular system.
Yeah.
And for a long time, scientists thought it was just this passive biological Teflon coating just to keep blood from sticking.
Just a smooth surface.
Right. But we now know it is a highly active, massive endocrine organ. Healthy endothelial cells constantly monitor the flow, the shear stress, and the chemical makeup of the blood.
Okay. And what do they do with that information?
When they sense an increase in flow, they manufacture and release a crucial molecule called nitric oxide.
Oh, nitric oxide. Okay, I know athletes take nitric oxide supplements for like a pump at the gym. It's the great vasodilator.
It's the master switch for opening up the pipes. Nitric oxide penetrates the smooth muscle cells surrounding the artery and chemically signals them to relax.
So when they relax, the artery widens and the blood pressure drops.
Exactly. But as we age and as our arteries undergo that structural stiffening we just talked about, this entire signaling process breaks down. The factory essentially goes offline.
Wow, so it's a double whammy. Not only is the physical structure of the pipe getting stiffer because the elastin is breaking down, but the chemical signals that normally tell the pipe to relax are failing too.
It is a compounding problem, yes.
Which brings up a question that I think anyone listening right now has to be wondering. If aging naturally causes this elastin fragmentation and collagen buildup, is this just a one-way street?
That is the big question.
Right, like are we just trying to put the brakes on and slow down the inevitable, or is this actually reversible?
What the traditional medical view was always that aging was a strictly non-modifiable risk factor. You just couldn't turn back the clock. But the 2025 review we're looking at highlights a massive paradigm shift.
Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah, regular targeted exercise has been proven to reverse the biological origin story of the disease. We can actively de-stiffen the arteries. We can force the endothelial cells to rebuild those nitric oxide factories.
That is incredibly empowering. I mean, it means the choices you make today can literally physically change the architecture of the pipes inside your body. You aren't just stuck with PVC pipes.
No, you're not. You have agency here.
Okay, so now that we know who the enemy is, stiff, rigid, uncooperative arteries, let's look at the traditional champion of heart health, cardio.
The reigning champ.
Right. Because when someone gets that high blood pressure reading, the absolute first thing they are told is go for a jog, ride a bike, get on the elliptical. How does standard cardio actually stack up against this new hard data?
Well, to answer that, we turn to a really comprehensive 2026 systematic review by Shaw and colleagues. It was published in Frontiers in Public Health.
Okay, and what did they find?
They specifically looked at how different exercise modalities impact that pulse wave velocity metric in older adults. And they found that standard aerobic exercise cardio provides modest but incredibly consistent improvements in arterial stiffness.
What's the actual number on that?
On average, regular aerobic training reduced pulse wave velocity by 0.62 meters per second.
So the shock wave is slowing down by over half a meter a second. That means the arteries are visibly getting softer and more flexible.
Exactly.
But, okay, what does that mean for the actual numbers on the blood pressure monitor? Like when you're sitting in your living room with the cuff on?
If we look back at the Edwards 2023 network meta-analysis, the data shows that aerobic exercise reliably reduces resting systolic blood pressure by an average of 4.49 millimeters of mercury, and the diastolic pressure drops by 2.53.
Okay, let's pause right there. Because 4.5 points on your systolic base. I mean, if your blood pressure is sitting at a dangerous 150, dropping it to 145.5 might not sound like a huge victory to a patient. Is that actually moving the needle on your health?
Oh, it is a life-altering reduction.
Really? Just 4.5 points?
Yes. In cardiovascular epidemiology, we know that a sustained 5-point drop in your systolic blood pressure correlates to roughly a 10% reduction in your relative risk for a major cardiovascular event, like a heart attack or a fatal stroke.
Oh, wow. So that 4.5-point drop from your daily cycling or jogging habit, that is doing massive, systemic, life-saving work behind the scenes.
Completely. On a population scale, a 4.5-point drop saves millions of lives.
Okay, so it absolutely works. But why does cardio do this? I mean, if I go for a 3-mile run, I'm sweating, my heart is pounding. How does that stressful event translate to lower blood pressure the next morning while I'm just drinking my coffee?
It's fascinating. Aerobic exercise essentially acts as a software update for your nervous system.
A software update, I like that.
Specifically, it reduces sympathetic nervous system activity. Your sympathetic nervous system is your fight-or-flight mechanism.
Right, the stress response.
Exactly. When you are stressed about work or sleep-deprived or just living in modern society, your sympathetic nervous system is constantly dripping small amounts of adrenaline and noradrenaline into your bloodstream.
Which does what to the arteries?
It keeps your blood vessels in a state of chronic, mild constriction. They are perpetually tense.
It's like walking around all day with your shoulders shrugged up to your ears, but for your blood vessels.
That is a perfect way to describe it, yes. Cardio actually trains your autonomic nervous system to lower that baseline tension. It increases vagal tone.
Which allows the parasympathetic rest and digest system to kind of take over when you aren't exercising, right?
Precisely.
Yeah.
Furthermore, aerobic exercise drastically increases the activity of an enzyme called ENOS endothelial nitric oxide synthase.
Wait, that's the machinery inside the cells that manufactures the nitric oxide we talked about earlier?
Exactly. By increasing the sheer volume of blood rushing over the endothelium during a jog, you are mechanically stimulating those cells. You are forcing them to upregulate their ENOS production.
Wow. So you are simultaneously telling the nervous system to stop constricting the vessels while providing the chemical needed to keep them open.
It's a two-pronged attack.
I love that. Cardio is literally training your nervous system to relax its grip. But, you know, the sources don't stop at just cardio. They dive heavily into something called concurrent training.
Yes, which is when you combine cardio with resistance training, like lifting weights.
And the data here is just staggering, isn't it?
It is arguably the most potent combination for overall vascular remodeling. The Shaw 2026 review found that concurrent training yielded the greatest overall benefits in arterial stiffness.
How much of a drop in the pulse wave velocity?
It reduced it by an average of 0.85 meters per second. That noticeably outperforms cardio alone.
Wow. But the real shock comes when we look at the specific trials focusing on blood pressure, right? Like, there's a study from 2023 by Alamahu and Tafiri.
Yes, published in the Ethiopian Journal of Health Sciences. They put participants through a 12-week program of concurrent training.
And what were the blood pressure drops in that trial? Because reading this, it was almost hard to believe.
They recorded systolic drops ranging from 12.67 to 17.75 millimeters of mercury.
Almost an 18-point drop in systolic blood pressure. That is competing with, and often beating, the efficacy of taking a combination of prescription medications.
It is profound.
So if cardio drops by 4.5, why does adding dumbbells to the mix suddenly triple the effectiveness? Let's walk through what is actually happening in the body there.
Well, it comes down to combining two entirely different types of physiological stress. With aerobic exercise, you're getting that sustained vascular flexibility, the nitric oxide boost, and the nervous system recalibration we just talked about.
Right.
But when you add resistance training, you are adding severe metabolic demands and unique mechanical compression. You are actively building muscle tissue.
And there's a really fascinating detail in the Shaw paper about the actual timeline of a concurrent workout. Like if I'm going to the gym for an hour, does it actually matter if I hit the treadmill first or the weights first?
The sequence matters immensely for vascular health.
Wait, really?
Yes. The review highlights research suggesting that doing your aerobic activity before your resistance training in a single session yields vastly superior vascular outcomes.
Okay, let's break down that timeline. Say I'm at minute 10 of my workout and I'm on the elliptical. What is happening?
At minute 10 on the elliptical, your heart rate is elevated but steady. You are pumping a large, continuous volume of blood through the arteries. This steady shear stress is waking up the endothelium.
So the cells are dumping nitric oxide into the system.
Exactly. And your arteries are physically dilating. They are becoming stretchy, compliant, and primed.
Okay, and then at minute 40, I get off the elliptical and I go do heavy seated leg presses.
Now you are subjecting your body to massive mechanical compression. When you push that heavy weight, your muscles contract violently, physically clamping down on the blood vessels trapped inside them.
Right, which makes your blood pressure spike acutely to force blood through those pinched vessels.
Yes. Now, if you hadn't done the cardio first, those vessels might be relatively stiff, taking the brunt of that massive pressure spike.
Oh, I see.
Because you primed the system with the elliptical, your arteries are flooded with nitric oxide. They are pliable. They can handle the intense mechanical loading and the resulting shear stress much more effectively.
Which leads to a far greater adaptation response overall. That is incredible. You hop on the bike to get the vessels dilated and stretchy, and then you go subject them to the heavy loads.
It's the perfect sequence for arterial health.
But I do want to clarify one thing from that Alamahu trial. Because if your sole goal in life is increasing your VO2 max, which is your body's maximum capacity to utilize oxygen during intense exercise, concurrent training actually wasn't the winner, right?
That is an important caveat. For raw cardiovascular engine power, aerobic training alone was still the absolute best.
It added over 12 milliliters per kilogram per minute to participants' VO2 max, which is a monumental leap in fitness.
It is. Concurrent training improved VO2 max too, but the fatigue from lifting weights slightly blunts the maximum aerobic adaptation.
So this is where we have to ask you, the listener, what your specific goal is.
Yeah.
Aerobic exercise is undeniably fantastic for overall longevity, building a massive aerobic engine, general health. But if your doctor just warned you that your blood pressure is in the danger zone and you need to bring those numbers down as efficiently as possible, cardio alone might not be the most optimized use of your time.
Which naturally leads us to a massive point of confusion and, frankly, decades of medical misinformation.
Lifting heavy weights.
Lifting heavy weights, yes.
Let's talk about the misunderstood contender here. Dynamic resistance training or traditional weightlifting. Because for a long time, especially in like the 80s and 90s, there was this pervasive myth.
Oh, I remember it well.
Right, that if you had high blood pressure, you should never lift heavy weights because it would make your arteries stiff and you might like have a stroke on the gym floor. What does the modern 2026 data actually say about that?
We really need to look at a highly comprehensive 2026 meta-analysis by Luo and colleagues. This was in the journal Frontiers in Cardiovascular Medicine.
Okay, what do they do?
They looked specifically at populations with varying baseline blood pressures who engaged strictly in dynamic resistance training. This is alternating muscle contractions against an external load, so dumbbells, barbells, machines.
And they analyzed, what, 18 robust studies?
Yes, with over 300 participants.
So, moment of truth. Did the weightlifting make their blood pressure worse?
The exact opposite. They found that dynamic resistance training significantly reduces resting systolic blood pressure by an average of 7.57 millimeters of mercury.
Wait, 7.6 points. So just lifting weights actually outperformed a treadmill.
It did. It outperformed the 4.49 drop from standard aerobic exercise.
That's amazing.
And what is most crucial for clinical application is that Luo's team found a dose-response relationship based on starting health. The higher your baseline blood pressure, the more dramatic the result.
So patients who already had stage 2 hypertension saw the most pronounced life-changing benefits from hitting the weights.
Yeah, exactly. It had the biggest impact on the people who needed it most.
So what did the actual workout look like to get a 7.6 point drop? Like, do I need to become a bodybuilder?
Not at all. The standard protocol across these successful trials was very accessible. Participants worked at roughly 60 to 80% of their 1-rep max.
Okay, so moderate to heavy, but not maximal effort.
Right. And they focused on multi-joint compound exercises. The chest presses, rows, leg presses, and squats. They did this just 2 to 3 times a week for 8 to 12 weeks.
That is extremely doable. But I need to ask a question here because I'm looking at two different pieces of data in our notes, and they seem to completely contradict each other.
Okay, let's hear.
So the Luo study says lifting weights drops your blood pressure by 7.6 points. But the Shaw 2026 systematic review we discussed earlier found that resistance training has a completely neutral, long-term effect on arterial stiffness.
Yes, that is correct.
They recorded a tiny, statistically insignificant plus 0.06 meter per second change in pulse wave velocity. So cardio makes your arteries physically more stretchy, but weightlifting doesn't.
Right. Weightlifting doesn't harm the arteries, which finally butts that old myth, but it doesn't make them stretchier either.
So how can a therapy lower your blood pressure by nearly 8 points without actually making the pipes more elastic? I don't get the mechanics of that.
It is a beautiful biological paradox, and it perfectly illustrates just how complex the human body is. Dynamic resistance training isn't working primarily on the arterial walls themselves.
Okay, so what is it working on?
It's working on the systemic environment that the arteries live in. It relies on indirect metabolic mechanisms.
Let's use an analogy here. I've heard muscle mass described as a metabolic sink, but I want to make sure we really visualize what that means for the listener.
Right.
Think of your bloodstream like a bathtub filling with water. The water pouring in from the faucet is the glucose, the sugar from the food you eat every day.
Okay, good visual.
And your muscles are the drain at the bottom of the tub. If you live a totally sedentary life and have very little muscle mass, you have a tiny clogged drain. So the sugar backs up, the tub overflows, and that excess glucose causes systemic inflammation. And chronic inflammation is a massive driver of high blood pressure, right? Because it irritates the endothelium.
That is a phenomenal visualization.
Yes.
When you lift weights and build muscle tissue through dynamic resistance training, you are physically widening the drain in the bathtub.
Because muscle is highly metabolically active tissue.
Exactly. It requires immense amounts of glucose just to exist and repair itself.
So by building a bigger drain, you clear the sugar out of the blood faster, which stops the inflammation. You aren't directly scrubbing the inside of the plumbing pipes the way a long jog does.
But you are fixing the entire structural integrity of the house. You are fighting age-related muscle loss, known as sarcopenia. You are fighting frailty.
And by lowering that systemic inflammation and improving insulin sensitivity, the overall vascular tone just naturally decreases. The pressure drops.
That's exactly it. It's a metabolic fix, not a mechanical one.
But I do have to push back on the safety aspect because we talked about the origin of this myth. If you've ever done a truly heavy deadlift or a heavy leg press, you know the feeling.
Oh, absolutely.
You hold your breath, your face gets red, the veins in your neck pop out, and you feel like your head might literally explode.
The Valsalva maneuver, yes.
Right. So if your blood pressure is spiking to like 250 or 300 over 150 during the actual lift, how on earth does that translate to a lower resting blood pressure the next day? Why doesn't that acute spike damage the system?
This requires understanding the difference between acute mechanical stress and chronic adaptation.
Okay, break that down.
When you lift a heavy weight, especially if you brace your core and hold your breath, your intra-abdominal pressure skyrockets and your blood pressure shoots up to overcome the resistance of the clamped muscles.
That's the acute stressor.
Yes. Interestingly, high-intensity resistance training actually triggers the temporary release of a molecule called endothelin-1, which is a potent vasoconstrictor.
Wait, so the body is releasing chemicals to make the pipes stiffer during the workout?
Yes, it literally forces the blood vessels to clamp down tightly. It is a brilliant protective mechanism.
To keep them from bursting under the pressure.
Exactly. The body stiffens the vessels to handle the extreme temporary pressure without rupturing. This is exactly why your arteries don't become instantly more elastic after lifting.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
your body is an ultimate adaptive machine. Over the weeks and months of a 12-week lifting program, your central nervous system and your cardiovascular system realize they need to handle these heavy loads more efficiently.
So the body says, okay, this person's going to keep picking up heavy things. We need to adapt our baseline.
Precisely. The chronic adaptation over time is a lowering of overall resting vascular tone. Your heart muscle gets stronger and more efficient, meaning it demands less cardiac output at rest.
And your systemic inflammation drops because of the larger metabolic sink.
Right. So the net result, measured hours and days after you leave the gym, is a significantly lower resting blood pressure.
Okay, let's summarize our heavy hitters so far, because this is a lot of data.
It is.
Cardio stretches the arteries out, increases your VO2 max, and drops your systolic pressure by roughly 4.5 points. Weightlifting builds your metabolic sink, lowers systemic inflammation, doesn't stretch the arteries, but drops your systolic by roughly 7.6 points.
Yes.
And doing them together, concurrent training, is a phenomenal strategy for overall health.
All of those are clinically validated, exceptional tools. And this is but as the Edwards Network meta-analysis revealed, there is a fourth option.
Yes, and this is where the episode gets wild. What if there was a way to almost double the effect of cardio without running a single mile?
And without lifting a single heavy barbell.
And without putting on gym clothes? What if you didn't even have to move a joint?
What?
Let's talk about the absolute most effective intervention we found in all of this data, isometric exercise.
This is the finding that practically broke the internet and disrupted the entire field of exercise cardiology when it was published in 2023.
The Edwards study in the British Journal of Sports Medicine.
Right. It compared every major exercise modality head-to-head, and isometric exercise completely dominated the results.
Okay, first, let's define isometric for the listener. What are we actually doing?
Isometric exercise involves contracting your muscles without changing their length. You are not pushing a weight up or lowering it down. You are simply holding a position under intense, unmoving tension.
And the results from doing that?
The meta-analysis showed that isometric exercise produced an astonishing 8.24 millimeter of mercury drop in systolic blood pressure and a 4.00 drop in diastolic.
8.24 points. That is nearly double the effectiveness of standard aerobic exercise for lowering that top systolic number.
It is. And it gets even more specific. When the researchers ran the statistical rankings to find the single best exercise, isometric wall squats ranked #1 overall for systolic reductions.
Achieving a HISURA score of 90.4%, right?
Yes.
Okay, a HISURA score. Let's translate that for everyone because it sounds incredibly technical.
SURA stands for surface under the cumulative ranking curve. But to avoid getting bogged down in statistics, just think of it as a win probability in that giant medical tournament bracket we talked about earlier.
Oh, okay. So if wall squats have a SERA score of 90.4%,
It means that 90% of the time, in all possible statistical matchups against other exercises, the wall squat is the undisputed champion for lowering systolic blood pressure.
so the undisputed champion of cardiovascular health is leaning your back flat against a wall, sliding down until your thighs are parallel to the floor, and just sitting there.
Just holding perfectly still in an invisible chair. Yeah.
Yes. That outperformed running, cycling, heavy weightlifting, everything. Now, I should note, for the sake of completeness, the study did show that running ranked #1 specifically for diastolic reductions, the bottom number.
Yes, that's true.
But for that top critical systolic number, the wall squat was king.
Wall squats are the primary lower body intervention here. But the research also heavily features isometric hand grip exercises for the upper body.
And the standard protocol that achieved these massive 8-point drops is remarkably simple and accessible, isn't it? Let's lay out the exact prescription. What is the dosage?
It's very straightforward. You perform 4 sets of 2-minute holds. You take a brief rest, usually 1 to 2 minutes in between each hold, and you do this entire routine just 3 times a week for 8 to 12 weeks.
And if you're doing the hand grip variation?
You squeeze a handheld dynamometer at about 30% of your maximum voluntary contraction.
Okay, let's do the math on that. 4 sets of 2 minutes. That is 8 minutes of actual active exercise per session.
Yep.
3 times a week. We are talking about a total absolute time commitment of 24 minutes a week. And for that 24 minutes, you get an 8.2-point drop in your systolic pressure.
It's unbelievable efficiency.
It's entirely comparable to taking a first-line antihypertensive pharmaceutical drug. There's another study mentioned in the Fitcraft review, Wiles et al., from 2017, that showed an incredible 12-point drop in clinical systolic pressure after just 4 weeks of people doing wall squats in their homes.
Yes, the short-term results can be very dramatic.
But how on earth does sitting perfectly still against a wall achieve this? Like, what is the mechanism?
It relies on a highly specific, very intense physiological mechanism that is completely different from jogging or lifting weights.
Okay, walk us through it.
When you hold a muscle in strict, unrelenting tension, like your quadriceps during a deep wall sit, or your forearms during a sustained hand grip, the sustained pressure within the muscle belly physically pinches off the blood vessels trapped inside.
Oh, wow.
It creates a state of partial occlusion. The blood flow to that working tissue is severely restricted.
So the quad muscle is firing on all cylinders to keep you from collapsing to the floor, but because it's squeezed tight, it's basically starving itself of fresh oxygen and blood.
Exactly. And because the flow is restricted, local metabolites, which are the chemical byproducts of muscle contraction, like lactate and hydrogen ions, cannot be flushed away.
So they just sit there.
They start building up rapidly in the tissue. This creates a highly localized temporary hypoxic state. The tissue is screaming for oxygen.
If you've ever done a wall sit, you know what minute 1.30 feels like. The burning sensation is intense.
Yes. The burn is the accumulation of those metabolites.
Mm.
But the magic doesn't happen during the burn, actually.
Really? When does it happen?
The magic happens when the timer goes off.
Whoa.
The therapeutic benefit occurs in the exact moment of release. When your 2 minutes are up and you finally stand up from the wall sit or you let go of the hand grip, the mechanical occlusion is instantly removed.
So what happens then?
Physiologically, this triggers an event called reactive hyperemia. The blood, which has been backing up behind the pinched vessels, violently rushes back into the starved tissue to deliver oxygen and clear out all those accumulated metabolites.
We talked about this earlier with cardio. When you get a massive sudden rush of blood, it creates intense physical shear stress against the walls of the arteries.
Exactly. But this shear stress is sudden, localized, and profound. This violent flush of blood is the ultimate trigger for the endothelium.
So it violently forces the endothelial cells to dump massive concentrated amounts of nitric oxide into the local system to instantly dilate the vessels and accommodate that flood of blood.
You've got it. That is exactly the mechanism.
I'm going to bring back our hose analogy because this explains it perfectly. It is exactly like kinking a garden hose.
It really is.
You've got the water running at a steady pace.
Yeah.
You fold the hose in half and pinch it tight. That is the wall sit. You hold the kink and you can feel the pressure building and building right behind the fold.
Yep, the occlusion.
Then, after 2 minutes, you let it go. You unkink the hose and whoosh! A massive high-pressure flush of water blasts through the line, clearing out any debris and violently stretching the physical material of the hose back to its absolute prime elasticity.
There's precisely what is happening to your vascular network. We refer to it as flow-mediated dilation. You are putting the arteries through cardiovascular target practice.
Cardiovascular target practice, I love that.
You are rapidly improving their ability to dilate on command, and you are retraining your autonomic nervous system's balance, all without requiring the massive whole-body cardiovascular exertion of running a 5K.
Because you aren't stressing the cardiac muscle itself the way you do in a sprint,
That's
right? You are purely stressing the vasculature out in the periphery of your body.
Exactly. It's peripheral training.
The convenience factor for you, the listener, is just unbelievable here. You do not need a gym membership. You don't need expensive running shoes. You don't even need to put on workout clothes.
No, you can do it anywhere.
You can buy a cheap $15 hand dynamometer online and do your 2-minute hand grip squeezes at your desk while you're on a Zoom meeting. Or you can do your 4 sets of wall sits in your hallway while your coffee is brewing in the morning.
24 minutes a week.
24 minutes a week to fundamentally change your vascular age and drop your blood pressure by 8 points. It's crazy.
The efficiency is unparalleled. However, we must address an important medical caveat here.
Let's do it.
Is it safe for someone who already has dangerous, uncontrolled high blood pressure to do an exercise that relies on temporarily pitching off blood flow and acutely spiking pressure?
Right, because if you kink the hose, the pressure behind the kink goes up immensely before you release it.
Exactly. The supervised clinical trials we've reviewed demonstrate a very strong safety profile overall. However, The acute intra-exercise pressure spike during an isometric hold is a real physiological event.
So who needs to be careful?
If an individual has unmanaged severe hypertension, say a resting systolic over an 160 or 180, or if they have had a recent cardiac event or an issue like an aortic aneurysm, they absolutely must consult a physician before initiating an intense isometric routine.
Because that sudden pressure spike during the 2-minute hold could be risky if the baseline pressure is already sitting in a hypertensive crisis zone.
Precisely. It's a localized spike, but it's significant.
So, as always, get cleared by your doctor. But for the vast majority of people listening who are dealing with pre-hypertension or stage 1 or stage 2 managed hypertension, the long-term benefits of that reactive hyperopia flush far outweigh the temporary acute stress of the wall sit.
Without question, it is a highly effective, targeted therapy.
Okay, so we found the holy grail of physical hacks for blood pressure, the 2-minute wall sit. But as we know, human biology does not exist in a vacuum.
Definitely not.
You cannot out-squat a terrible lifestyle. You can do your wall sits every morning, but if your diet is a disaster, you are fighting a losing battle.
Oh, for sure. Diet is the foundation.
So how do we ensure that these incredible vascular gains we're making aren't completely wiped out by what we put on our plate? And how do we actually track our success to make sure this is working?
Well, that brings us to the crucial liturgy between exercise and daily nutrition. The clinical management of hypertension is a multi-pronged attack. The literature overwhelmingly supports specific dietary patterns, primarily the DASH diet.
That stands for dietary approaches to stop hypertension, right?
Yes, as well as Mediterranean-style diets.
No, the generic advice we mocked at the beginning of the show always includes eat less salt. And sure, I understand the mechanics of sodium. Excess sodium in your bloodstream pulls water into your blood vessels through osmosis.
Right, it increases blood volume.
More water volume inside a closed pipe means higher pressure against the walls. But isn't focusing entirely on removing salt missing half the equation? Isn't adding the right nutrients like potassium and magnesium just as important as taking the bad stuff away?
This is a major paradigm shift that many patients are frankly never taught. Hypertension is very often a disease of deficiency rather than just a disease of excess.
Oh, interesting. A disease of deficiency.
Yes, the modern Western diet contains vastly too much processed sodium, sure. But more importantly, we are severely, chronically deficient in dietary potassium and magnesium.
Let's dive deep into the cells on that. How do potassium and magnesium actually work to lower blood pressure?
On a cellular level, your body operates something called the sodium-potassium pump. These two minerals balance each other constantly. While sodium constricts vessels and retains fluid volume, potassium acts as a natural, potent relaxant to the vessel walls.
Oh, wow.
Furthermore, high potassium intake actually signals your kidneys to excrete excess sodium out through your urine.
So if you were doing your wall sits to unkink the hose, and you were doing your cardio to build your nitric oxide, but your diet is packed with ultra-processed foods and completely devoid of potassium,
You are essentially pumping toxic sludge through that newly cleaned hose.
you are giving the arteries the structural ability to relax, but depriving them of the chemical minerals they need to actually execute the relaxation.
That is exactly what is happening. And magnesium plays a similar vital role. Magnesium acts as a natural calcium channel blocker.
Wait, remember earlier when we discussed calcification making the arteries stiff?
Yes, magnesium helps regulate that calcium, naturally relaxing the smooth muscle inside the arterial walls.
So what does a potassium and magnesium-rich day actually look like? Because everyone just says, eat a banana.
Bananas are fine, but they aren't even the best source. A truly protective diet involves leafy greens like spinach and Swiss chard, avocados, sweet potatoes, beans, lentils, nuts, and seeds.
Real whole foods.
It is about fundamentally shifting your plate away from boxed, processed foods where the potassium has been stripped away and replaced with sodium preservatives, back to whole foods.
And the synergy of combining this mineral-rich diet with the sheer stress of isometric exercise improves not just your blood pressure, but your endothelial function, your heart rate variability, and drastically lowers your long-term risk of a stroke.
Yes, the compounding effects are incredible.
And implementing this requires profound consistency, which is where digital tracking comes into play. Because we live in an incredible era where the clinical management of hypertension has moved from the sterile doctor's office into the patient's living room.
The modern patient has access to tools that researchers 30 years ago would have killed for.
Oh, totally.
Continuous heart rate monitors, smartwatches, Bluetooth-enabled home blood pressure cuffs. They allow us to map our physiology in real time.
The power of the feedback loop is what I love most about this.
Mhm.
You can use your smartphone to create your own personalized clinical trial. You log your workouts, you log your wall sits, you track your daily steps, your meals, your sodium and potassium intake.
You can track your sleep, too.
Right, sleep.
Sleep and stress management being crucial covariates, as a lack of deep sleep directly spikes that sympathetic nervous system tone we discussed earlier, keeping the vessels constricted.
Exactly. When you track your 3 times a week wall sits on your phone, alongside actively increasing your potassium intake, and you watch your home blood pressure cuff numbers steadily drop week by week,
It changes your entire psychology.
it turns a depressing medical chore like, oh, I have to manage my chronic illness into a highly motivating, gamified experience. You get to see the dial move. You are in control.
And this gamification has very real, tangible clinical implications. Hypertension guidelines worldwide recommend lifestyle modification as the absolute first-line therapy. But, frankly, doctors often prescribe medication immediately upon diagnosis because, statistically, they assume patients will not comply with lifestyle changes.
This is kind of depressing.
It is a harsh reality of medical practice. But with proper tracking and objective digital evidence of lower resting blood pressure charted out on your phone, patients can return to their doctors and work collaboratively to actively reduce or de-escalate their medications.
That is the ultimate dream for so many people. You aren't just managing a slow decline. You are actively mathematically proving to your physician that your vascular age is reversing.
Exactly.
You're handing them a spreadsheet or an app dashboard that says, look, my systolic is down 10 points over the last 8 weeks, which can potentially lead to fewer pills, lower dosages, and entirely eliminating pharmaceutical side effects.
It transforms the patient from a passive recipient of a generic medical directive into an active, empowered participant in their own health outcomes.
We have covered an immense amount of ground today, looking deep under the hood of our cardiovascular system. Let's synthesize the ultimate playbook for you, the listener. If you want to optimize your blood pressure and genuinely reverse your vascular age, here is what the absolute cutting-edge science says you should do.
Let's review the steps.
Number 1, do your cardio. Aerobic exercise is essential to improve your VO2 max, lower your resting heart rate, train your nervous system to relax, and maintain the overall elasticity in your arteries.
Right. It's the baseline.
Number 2, lift weights. Dynamic resistance training builds your metabolic sink. It widens the drain to clear out glucose, preserves your muscle mass as you age, fights systemic inflammation, and significantly lowers your resting blood pressure, especially if your numbers are already elevated.
Crucial for long-term metabolic health.
Number 3, incorporate the secret weapon, isometrics. Do 4 sets of 2-minute wall sits or hand grip squeezes 3 times a week. Those 24 minutes a week will deliver an unparalleled 8-point drop or more in your systolic pressure by flushing your arteries with nitric oxide and forcing them to dilate.
The absolute king of blood pressure reduction.
And number 4, support the physical work with chemical building blocks. Eat a potassium and magnesium-rich diet, eliminate the ultra-processed, high-sodium sludge, and track it all digitally to prove to yourself and your doctor that you are winning the fight.
It is a beautifully comprehensive, evidence-based strategy. It attacks the pathogenesis of hypertension from every conceivable angle, structural, chemical, and metabolic.
So here's my direct challenge to you. Wake up tomorrow morning, sit quietly in a chair for 5 minutes, and take your blood pressure with a home cuff. Write that exact number down.
Gets that baseline.
Then, find a blank spot on your wall and start your wall sit routine. 4 sets, 2 minutes each, 3 days a week. It will burn, but push through it. Track your food, increase your potassium, and keep up your daily walking. Do this for exactly 4 weeks, and then take your blood pressure again.
You'll be amazed.
You have the power to fundamentally alter your cardiovascular future. High blood pressure is not an inevitable, unchangeable decline.
The data proves it is highly modifiable, and I will leave you with a final thought to mull over. We have seen today that the research is undeniable. Consumer digital health apps and a simple $40 home blood pressure cuff can precisely prove that 24 minutes of isometric exercise a week matches and sometimes exceeds the efficacy of a pharmaceutical drug.
Which is mind-blowing.
As the healthcare system desperately looks for ways to reduce costs and improve patient outcomes, are we approaching a future where a doctor doesn't just hand you a prescription for a pill, but actually writes wall sits, 4 sets, 3 times a week on their notepad, and monitors your compliance and progress through an app with the exact same clinical rigor as a pharmaceutical trial?
Now that is a truly fascinating thought, Exercise, quite literally, is medicine, and thanks to the data, we finally have the exact dosage instructions. Thank you so much for diving deep into the science with us today. Keep learning, keep moving, and we will see you next time.